Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Medical Board of California's live webinar to go over the licensure requirements for physicians and surgeons and postgraduate training licenses. I'm Maureen O'Connor, and I'm the licensing chief for the Medical Board of California. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the board's website. Next slide, please. There are two main licenses to practice as a physician surgeon in California: the Postgraduate Training License, or PTL, and the Physicians and Surgeons License. The Postgraduate Training License is required for anyone that enrolls in an ACGME accredited postgraduate training program in California. To be eligible for a PTL, the applicant must be enrolled in an ACGME accredited training program in California and have received all of their medical education and graduated from a medical school recognized by the board. International medical school graduates must be certified by the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates, or ECFMG. Next slide, please. You should apply for a PTL as soon as you enroll in a California ACGME accredited program, or at least 6 months prior to when you need your license. You can apply online and don't need to have all documentation needed for licensure yet. Submitting the application early will ensure your application is reviewed far enough in advance to allow you time to provide the board all required documents. If you have any unusual circumstances, such as prior convictions, the license review process may take longer, as the board needs to obtain additional information and conduct additional reviews. So it's especially important you apply early in this situation. You must obtain a PTL within 180 days of enrollment in an ACGME accredited program, but do not wait until the end of the 180 days to apply for a PTL. If your PTL is not issued within 180 days of enrollment in an ACGME accredited program, you must cease training until the PTL has been issued. The law authorizes the board to issue PTLs up to 15 months for U.S. or Canadian medical school graduates and 27 months for international medical school graduates. If an applicant has not yet completed any board-approved training, the board will issue the PTL for the full 15 or 27 months, even if the applicant is beginning an internship or preliminary year. However, if you are transferring to a new program after your first year of residency, the board requires specific documentation to be submitted, which I will cover later in the presentation. A PTL holder should obtain a physician's and surgeon's license before their PTL expires. If a physician's and surgeon's license is not obtained by the time the PTL expires, the licensee must cease all clinical practice in California. Next slide, please. You must apply for a PTL online through the Breeze system. If you are unable to, please email licensing.questions@mbc.ca.gov with a brief explanation as to why you are not able to apply online. The board's website has a link to the online application and a checklist of all information needed to submit an application online. When applying online, once you get to the payment screen, you can no longer go back and make any changes to the application. The board must receive both the application and the required fee to consider the application submitted. An application missing either of these items will not be considered received and will not be reviewed. When completing the online application, the applicant may attach all documents required to be submitted by the applicant, such as the timeline of activities without any gaps, an explanation for application question form if they provided a positive answer to any of the questions on the application, a copy of the live scan form, and if requesting expedite, all of the documents required to qualify for expedite. If the board is unable to determine whether the applicant qualifies for expedite, the application will not be expedited, even if expedite was requested on the initial application. The applicant must submit fingerprints. If you are located in California, you can visit any live scan facility to be fingerprinted and bring a completed live scan form available on the board's website to the facility. If you are located outside of California, you may submit fingerprint hard cards, which the board will mail to you, but this process may take up to several months compared to the live scan process that usually only takes a few days. If you want the fingerprint hard cards to be mailed to a different address than the address provided on the application, you may email licensing.questions@mbc.ca.gov and provide the address you would like the hard cards mailed to. The applicant must submit official examination scores. If the applicant took the USMLE, they must request the Federation of State Medical Boards to provide the board their score report. International medical school graduates must submit an ECFMG certification status report by contacting the ECFMG to request the certification status report be sent directly to the board. Next slide, please. Some application forms may not be submitted by the applicant, but rather must be submitted directly from the primary source. The medical school must provide a certificate of medical education, an official medical school transcript, and a certified copy of the medical school diploma. For any previously completed training, the postgraduate training program must submit a certificate of completion of postgraduate training form, referred to as the PTA-PTB. This form must be submitted for all ACGME, RCPSC, and CFPC accredited training, whether credit was granted or not. The currently enrolled program must submit the enrollment form, referred to as Form EF. If the applicant is beginning or has recently begun an internship or preliminary year and is transferring to a different program for their second year, the board will need a new enrollment form for the second year program, which can be submitted to the board at any time, even with the initial PTL application. The program name and enrollment dates are printed on the license and available to the public on the board's license lookup. So it is critical to notify the board if this information changes, such as transferring to a new program. All of these forms may be submitted electronically through the board's direct online certification submission portal, also known as DOCS, which is a much quicker and safer way for the school and training program to submit these forms to the board. If they are submitted through DOCS, they do not require a seal or notarization. Later this year, the board will no longer accept these forms through the mail, and medical schools and programs will be required to submit them through DOCS. The DOCS portal only accepts documents for individuals with an open application, but the board is working on changes to allow documents to be submitted for licensees as well. The DOCS registration information is available on the board's website. The board cannot accept these documents if submitted by the applicant. Mailed forms must have original wet signatures. The law authorizes the board to extend a PTL beyond 15 or 27 months only to allow the resident to obtain the training needed to qualify for physician's and surgeon's license. For example, if a resident was issued a PTL for 15 months and took a 4-month leave of absence during their first year of training and had to make up this time, then the board could extend the PTL beyond 15 months to allow the resident to obtain credit for 12 months of training. A PTL may not be extended beyond 15 or 27 months for any other reason. If training needs to be extended beyond the dates identified on the enrollment form, then the program would be responsible for submitting the Program Status Update Change Form, or PSU form, which I will go over on the next slide. The PSU form must be submitted by a postgraduate training program within 30 days of any of the following actions. A PTL holder's postgraduate training period is extended, a PTL holder is terminated from the program, a PTL holder resigns, dies, or leaves the program, or a PTL holder completes a 1-year contract approved by the program. If a PTL holder transfers programs before the program end date identified on the original enrollment form, the old program must submit the PSU form, and the new program must submit an EF form. This allows the board to update the program information on the license, which displays in the online license lookup and on the PTL Pocket license. A PTL holder may apply for a physician's and surgeon's license by submitting an online transition application. An applicant must obtain credit for 12 or 24 months of board-approved postgraduate training to obtain a physician's and surgeon's license. A PTO holder does not have to wait to complete 12 or 24 months of training to submit the transition application. A PTO holder should submit a transition application at least 6 months prior to completion of 12 or 24 months of training to allow sufficient time for processing and remediating any deficiencies. The board will accept the PTA-PTB form up to 30 days prior to completion of the training required for licensure. For example, the program director may sign the PTA-PTB form after completion of and credit granted for 11 months of board-approved postgraduate training for a U.S. or Canadian medical school graduate. The license will not be issued until all requirements are met. Next slide, please. The transition application must be submitted online through the BREEZE system. The transition applicant does not have to pay another application fee, but must pay half of the initial license fee if they provide proof of current enrollment in a board-approved postgraduate training program by submitting the current postgraduate training enrollment form or Form CTV. Without Form CTV, the applicant must pay the full initial license fee. These initial license fees include a mandatory $25 Stephen M. Thompson Physician Corps Loan Repayment Program fee. The applicant must request the FSMB to provide an exam score report to the board that shows a passing score on Step 3 of the USMLE and request their program to submit the final PTA-PTB that verifies completion of the training required to obtain a physician's and surgeon's license. PTL holders should schedule and pass the USMLE Step 3 far enough in advance to ensure the board receives the exam score prior to their PTL expiration date. The PTL expiration date may not be extended to allow more time to pass the required exam. To continue practicing in California, the physician's and surgeon's license must be issued prior to expiration of the PTL, as practice is not permitted with an expired PTL. Physicians and surgeons license applicants that do not hold a PTL and completed their training in another state must submit the application for a physician's and surgeon's license, either online through the BREEZE system or by mail. In the board's continued transition to a paperless application process, paper physicians and surgeons applications will not be accepted after May 31st. The board will be posting this deadline on its website and sending out reminder notifications. Applicants must submit the required application, an application fee, which includes the fingerprint fee, either the reduced or full initial license fee, which includes the $25 Stephen M. Thompson fee, fingerprints, examination scores, ECFMG certification status report if they are an international medical school graduate, and any other applicable forms. All forms submitted by the applicant may be attached when applying online through BREEZE. Per Business and Professions Code Section 2184, examination passing scores must be within 10 years from the date of the examination to be considered valid. Statute provides for some exceptions to this requirement, such as time spent in a postgraduate training program used to extend the validity of the scores. Applicants and programs should familiarize themselves with these exceptions if the passing scores are more than 10 years old. If the applicant is transferring from out of state to an ACGME accredited training program in California, they must obtain a physician's and surgeon's license within 90 days of enrollment. In this scenario, the board would not issue the incoming resident a PTL since they have already completed the training required for licensure and have 90 days to obtain a physician's and surgeon's license. If they are not transferring into an ACGME accredited training program, they must obtain a physician's and surgeon's license before practicing in California. To allow sufficient time for processing, the board recommends they submit the application at least 6 months prior to when they will need a license. The applicant must submit the medical school and postgraduate training programs. The applicant must request the medical school and postgraduate training programs to submit all of the required forms. The MED, official transcripts, certified copy of the diploma, the PTA/PTB, and the CTV. All of these documents may be submitted through the board's docs portal. The appropriate license application may depend on how many months credit of postgraduate training you will have when you begin your residency in California. If you have not obtained credit for 12 or 24 months of board-approved postgraduate training, then you should apply for a PTL. If you obtained credit for less than 12 or 24 months of board-approved training outside of California before transferring to a California ACGME accredited program, then you may apply for a PTL, but it will only be issued up to the point in which you will have obtained credit for 12 or 24 months of training. So you may need to apply for a physician surgeon's license shortly afterwards. If you have a PTL or have ever held a PTL, you must submit a transition application. If you have already obtained 12 or 24 months of board-approved training outside of California, or you will have obtained this training by the time you start your California ACGME accredited program, then you should not apply for a PTL and instead apply for a physician's and surgeon's license. You will have 90 days from the date of enrollment in your California ACGME accredited program to obtain your physician's and surgeon's license. If you do not obtain your license within 90 days, you will have to cease training. An applicant that will not be enrolled in a California ACGME accredited program does not have 90 days and must obtain a physician's and surgeon's license before beginning clinical practice. For physicians and surgeons licenses issued January 1, 2022 or later, a licensee must provide proof of completion of 36 months of board-approved postgraduate training, including 24 consecutive months in the same program, in order to renew their license for the first time. Documentation of completion of the required training may be submitted to the board on the PTA/PTB form. Currently, the form must be mailed to the board for physician and surgeon licensees, as the board's docs portal only accepts documents for current license applicants. A licensee must provide this documentation to the board no later than 60 days after their initial license expiration date. If documentation is not received and accepted by the board within this timeframe, the license status will change to delinquent and practice will not be permitted. This deadline cannot be extended. The board recommends that licensees request this documentation from their program as soon as it is completed, as the PTA/PTB form may be signed 30 days prior to completion of the required training. Once the board verifies completion of 36 months of board-approved postgraduate training, including 24 months in the same program, the licensee never has to submit the documentation again. This is only required for the licensee's initial renewal. The licensee may submit their renewal application online prior to submitting this documentation to the board, but the renewal application will not be approved until the board has received and accepted the required training verification. Research conducted during the first 3 years of residency could potentially pose a problem for meeting the renewal requirements. If conducting research while holding a PTL, the PTL will only remain current if the resident maintains enrollment in the ACGME accredited program. If the resident does not maintain enrollment while conducting research, then the PTL will not be valid and clinical practice is not permitted. An initial physician's and surgeon's license is issued for a 2-year period. Once a physician's and surgeon's license is issued, the licensee has 2 years before the license expiration date in which to obtain the training required for renewal. The licensee must ensure they will have obtained credit for 36 months of board-approved postgraduate training, including 24 months in the same program, by the time their license expires. If the licensee conducted research during their PGY 2 or 3 and was not earning credit for training, then they may run into the situation where they have not obtained credit for the required number of months of postgraduate training in order to renew their license. The law does not authorize the board to extend the license expiration date more than 60 days to allow a licensee to provide documentation to the board that verifies completion of the required training. If a licensee will not have completed 24 consecutive months of board-approved training within 60 days of their license expiration, They should contact the board immediately so the board may determine the appropriate next steps. I will now go over a few common questions the board receives about the application process and licensing requirements. License applicants may check the status of their application anytime in the Breeze system, whether they applied in Breeze or by mail. Once the application is reviewed, the applicant will receive a deficiency letter, and Breeze will also display a list of any remaining deficiencies. The applicant will only be contacted when the board requests new information or a new document. Once a deficiency is remediated, it will be removed from the deficiency list in Breeze. Applicants may check their deficiencies in Breeze at any time to determine if a document has been accepted or a deficiency remediated. Applicants are not notified when a document is accepted, as this is indicated by the deficiency being removed from the list in Breeze. The board cannot confirm the receipt of documents. All documents attached in Breeze and Docs are received. For mailed documents, the board recommends using a mail tracking service. The applicant may also confirm with third parties if their documents were submitted to the board. Some documents required to be submitted by the applicant may be emailed to the assigned reviewer from the email address on record, but the applicant should first confirm this is acceptable with their assigned reviewer. The board no longer mails wallet cards. Electronic wallet cards may be generated and downloaded through the board's website. Practice is not permitted with an expired PTL or physician's and surgeon's license. A physician's and surgeon's license must be obtained prior to that PTL expiration in order to continue clinical practice in California. A licensee is responsible for knowing when their license expires. One of the common questions we received from the webinar registrants was how long does it take to get their license? The time to issue a license varies depending on many factors. Currently, the board is reviewing applications about 80 days from the date of receipt. Once the application is reviewed, the applicant must remediate all deficiencies. Applications with unusual circumstances take longer to review due to additional information needed and depending on the complexity of the issue. If an application has no deficiencies or unusual circumstances at the time of the initial review, the license would likely be issued within 2 weeks. This concludes my presentation. Licensing analyst and outreach coordinator Rhonda Baldo will be joining me to answer your questions. But before we take questions from participants, I'd like to ask individuals to not discuss pending licensing applications or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications, as they could provide information to the board members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. Therefore, such discussions could create a conflict and lead to a board decision being challenged in Superior Court. I'd like to remind participants that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the board's website. We cannot answer questions about confidential information provided in a specific application or provide updates on the status of a specific application. While we will do our best to answer all of your questions, some specific scenarios may depend on multiple factors, and you may need to email the board separately so the board can accurately address your issue. We will conclude the Q&A session at 1:30 p.m., and any questions we do not get to can be emailed to the board at the email address on your screen at licensing.questions@mbc.ca.gov. I will now turn it over to Sean to go over the Q&A format.
Thank you, Maria. The WebEx hand raising feature is active for anyone. I see a lot of people have already found it, and I see quite a queue already going here. But in the participants section of the WebEx application there, next to your name, you should see a little icon for toggling raising your hand and lowering your hand. If your question gets asked by somebody else, you can go ahead and lower your hand. But just go ahead and put the hand up if you have a question, and we'll call on them in the order that we see them come in. First up here, we have Jan Kiernan. Jan, I'm sending you a request on your end. You'll have to unmute from your computer, and you can go ahead and ask your question. Looks like your line's open, Jan.
Regarding my current class of PGY3s who are graduating as of June 30th, 2023, many of them have already started their application process, and we have submitted PTA and B to verify their 12 months of training, plus or minus wherever we are in the cycle right now. So 30, 32, whatever, to ensure they're licensed for July 1. My question is, on July 2nd, for example, when I can verify all 17 of them have completed 36 months of training, can I submit the PTA and B for them to verify 36 months at that point? Or do I have to wait until they're reapplying 2 years from now?
If they complete their training on June 30th, 2023, you can actually submit the final PTA PTB 30 days prior to that. So you can sign it 30 days prior to that and then submit it. So that would be
Is
the
there
end.
an updated form that says that? Because that's not what the current form says.
Well, we did update the form so that it does say that. So it could be you're looking at an old form, but the current form should reflect that you can submit it 30 days in advance.
What's the current form's date version?
I don't have that in front of me, but if you want to email licensing.questions, I'd be happy to provide that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Will the slides for this be available from this presentation?
Yes. Yeah, we'll post the slides, although based on the questions I get in this Q&A session, I might update some of the slides just to make sure it includes, all the information that folks are looking for. I mean, it won't address every question, but I just want to make sure the common questions are addressed in the slides before posting it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jen. Next here we have L Fine. L Fine, you should be receiving a request at your computer there to unmute. Good afternoon, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can, please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much, Lena Fine. I'm a physician. I have a question applying for a license after deficiency is identified and a letter or form is sent. How long approximately before that is corrected, and if not, how should I be contacting the board?
Just to make sure I understand your question, you're saying you received a deficiency letter and then you submitted documentation after you got the deficiency letter, and you're just wondering how long it takes for us to review that documentation?
Yes.
Yeah, that time can vary depending on volume, but it's typically within 2 weeks that your document would be reviewed. And then if it was accepted, you wouldn't hear from us. It would just be removed as a deficiency in Breeze. But if there was any question or issue with that form, you would receive another deficiency notification from the assigned reviewer, likely in the form of an email.
So if I didn't receive it in the last 3 months, I should contact them?
Well, I would check online in Breeze to see if that deficiency that you were submitting
I did.
documentation
Yeah,
for.
it was
Oh,
it was
okay.
very straightforward fingerprints, which were sent me
Oh,
by registered mail. And
right.
so, so now I'm curious, since it's been now 3.5 months, if I didn't hear back, what should I do?
So in Breeze, it does not show fingerprints as a deficiency anymore.
Yeah, it does. It shows still whatever criminal
I see.
investigation being reviewed.
Yeah, and just to be clear, you submitted fingerprint hard cards or you went to a live
Cards,
scan?
registered mail, and I received back the stamp that the board received it.
Yeah, you can, reach out to your assigned reviewer to make sure that we received the fingerprint cards, because if it's been that long, we definitely should have received them by now. But if we've already received them and submitted them to DOJ, we don't have any control over how long it takes them to process fingerprint results.
Got it. My second question, I'll contact them. Thank you.
Okay,
My
sure.
second question is for physicians who had completed dual residencies, meaning they had completed where it's not the PTA B forms, there's an overlap in years of completion because the requirements for 2 residencies overlapped. And so the Breeze form does not really accommodate for that. An explanatory letter was sent. I am concerned, as this has been a problem over a few months, how to be able to explain and help the board understand the dual residency completion requirements. I hope my question.
Yeah, if you provided an explanation and what you said, I believe you said the letter of explanation you attached. If if we had questions or weren't sure about it or weren't able to accept it, we would notify you. So I think it's safe to assume if you haven't heard from us, we've accepted it, especially if it's no longer listed as a deficiency in
It
breeze.
is, it is still listed as a
Ah,
deficiency.
okay.
That's why, so I'm just
Yeah,
concerned. Yeah, just,
absolutely. I would say if it's been more than 2 weeks, definitely reach out to your assigned reviewer and make sure there aren't any other questions or issues with what you submitted.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your question. Next up here, we have Mary Geno. Mary should be receiving that prompt on your end. Afternoon, Mary, are you there? Hey, Mary, it looks like you've unmuted, but not hearing any audio. Oh, we lost Mary. Hopefully she's reconnecting. She can re-ask her question. Next up here, we have Dr. Joe Schrand. Dr. Joe Schrand, you should be receiving that prompt. Looks like your line's open. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can, yeah. Please go ahead.
Wonderful. First, thanks for the presentation. All right, so I am a child psychiatrist in Massachusetts. I've been practicing since 1995. Two of my kids have moved out to California and we're thinking of moving out there. I sent off some of the application already, but there's no grandfathering in, I assume. I mean, I am not quite a grandfather, but old enough to be one.
It really depends on a lot of things. There is a statute for folks who hold a license in another state or have held a license in another state. So basically, when you submit your application, we're going to review it through that lens. So we'll look to see if it meets those requirements specifically for someone who's licensed in another state. And if
Okay.
you don't meet the requirements needed for someone in another state, then we would just review your application based on the same requirements as anyone else if they weren't licensed in theirs. So once you submit the app, we'll do that review and we'll definitely let you know if there's anything else needed or if there's any concern with you qualifying for licensure.
Okay, appreciate it. I mean, because I have submitted it and it looks like they're asking for my board scores back from 93, 97. I mean, I've passed the boards 3 times, been licensed in Massachusetts and Rhode Island this whole time. I'm chief medical officer for a couple of places. So and I actually was in touch with somebody, sent them an email today because I was going to listen to you guys, and she has left the office and forwarded me to somebody new. But it would be great. The last name is Schrand, Shrand. Take a
If
look.
you could, yeah,
Yep.
if you can actually email the email address on the screen,
Yep.
it sounds like you have a very specific situation with your application that I'm not going to be able
Yes.
to address on here. So yeah, just email that information to that address and we'll look into it.
Thank you so much. Much
You're
appreciated.
welcome.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Next up here, we have Quarig 002. Quarig 002, you should be receiving that request.
2 questions, actually. I'm a program coordinator for a residency program in California. Anyway, on the slides, there was a statement about requiring the certification of 36 months of training. I was under the impression that the board had agreed to the new ACGME requirements that we could, if they took that leave, as long as a program director approved their education piece of it, we would be able to certify them right without having to say they specifically had 36 months. Because there were some emails that were sent out from the board. Did that change back again?
So it's credit granted for 36 months. So it's up to the program to decide if they're getting credit for 36
Gotcha.
months or not.
Okay, got you. That makes sense. Now, the other question I had is sort of similar in nature. Our 3rd years were granted PTLs in the beginning, and when the process changed so that they could get their full licensure, they all jumped on it because they wanted to moonlight. So some of our 3rd years, due to the birthday rule, their full P&S license will expire prior to their graduating from the program, like in May and so on. Specifically, one that'll be extending because of an LOA that they took. And in order to get all of the required trainings in, this resident's going to have to extend. So how does that work if when they're issued their full PNS license, if it's not for the full till the time they graduate, we can't certify. We can certify 24 months in one program, but we can't certify them having completed their education because they haven't done it yet. So is there a specific form I use to notify the board that they're still in training?
So I might not be able to answer your question completely for all the scenarios you're talking about, so you might need to email us. But just generally speaking, if they were issued a physician surgeon's license, they have to have already have obtained at least 1 year of postgraduate training. So they should already have the 12 months and only need 24 months left. So if once the license is issued, that started the 2-year clock. So if they're not on track to complete those 2 years by the time their license expires, you definitely need to reach out to us right away because it kind of
What-
depends on the situation.
Okay, is there a specific form to use or just reach out?
There's no form because the law is very specific as far as this must be completed by the time your license expires, although there is that 60 days, you get an extra 60 days after your license expires. But if they're not going to be able to get credit for 36 months by the time 60 days is up, then
I'll
it's really
I'll
yeah.
reach out. That's fine. I've already
That's
done
fine,
it once
yeah.
and didn't receive, I never got an answer, and I followed up 3 times. So this has been a really difficult scenario, but I will reach out again and see what I
Okay.
can accomplish.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up here we have Wanja Turner, I believe. Looks like your line's open. Are you there?
Questions. My first question is, she had mentioned that we can, after May, I believe you said, no longer send paper forms. As far as the wet signature from the program director when we upload the PTA and PTB form, is that still required, or can the program director sign electronically?
You're referring to in docs, correct?
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and I hate to not give you a straight answer, but since there's many different types of electronic signatures, it kind of depends on the type of electronic signature it is. So if you could just email licensing.questions with that specific scenario, what type of electronic signature it is, because there's DocuSign, there's a copy of a signature, then there's, Adobe has their own, automatically generated signature. So it might depend on how it's being signed, because we just have to be, we're trying to be as consistent as possible. And, as we get, more used to electronic signatures, we're being very specific in which ones we accept and don't accept. So if you don't mind just emailing licensing.questions with letting them know it's going to be, this type of electronic signature, we can definitely let you know if we can accept it.
Okay. And our prelims, we have every year we have 7 or 8 prelims come into our program. And you mentioned that they can start their process 6 months prior to moving on to their new program. And if we submitted the PTA and PTB form for them within, while they're doing their 6 months, is a second form required once they are completed with our program with that after program date signature? For instance, I'm internal medicine, Kaiser Oakland. They end on June 23rd. So do I need to submit another completion form on June 20, dated June 24 for June 30th as well?
These are PGY ones, you said?
Yes, prelims who are going to another program.
Okay. You don't need to really submit it until they've either the 11-month mark or after. So anything submitted prior to that won't be acceptable as far as for when they apply for their physician surgeon's license, because when they apply for their physician surgeon's license, we're going to need those PTA, PTBs that show they've either, it's either been signed off on the 11th month or, depending on how far they are, or after the 12 months. So anything that's signed prior to the 11-month mark is not going to be, we're not going to be able to use it.
Okay, so even though they're applying, I just hold off on my part until the
Yes.
11th. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I got that. I got that. Okay. That was it for me. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Next up here, we have Cha Esquera. Cha, I'm sending that request. Okay, Cha, I'm not seeing you opening up your line here. Another second here. We're going to go to Kenneth Igskowski. Sorry, Kenneth. We can hear you, Kenneth. Please go ahead.
If someone had an adverse action, how lengthy of a delay is that likely to cause in the processing of their application? For example, if someone had an out-of-court malpractice settlement 15 years ago, and or a citation as a result of that, however, that fact has not resulted in any problem getting a license from any other state, how much of a delay might that tend to cause?
I can't really say specifically for your scenario because we'd have to look at it first. It's case by case, but generally speaking, some extra review time for those unusual circumstances could be a matter of days. Some could be a matter of months. It just depends on the situation. So, if it's a matter of days, it's something we've looked at and determined no, this doesn't need to continue on for additional review. We'll just continue the application through the normal licensing process. If it's something where we look at and we think we need more information or additional higher level review, then it could take longer. It could take at least a month or more, and then depending on how much more information we need and the complexity of the situation. So I know that's a wide range, but unfortunately, it really is case by case.
Okay, looks like I remuted here. So we're going to go to Nicole Losick. Nicole, you should be receiving that request. We can hear you, Nicole. Please go ahead.
Okay, I have two questions. We kind of have a conflict on this side for the fees for the PTL.
Your question's just asking what are the fees for the PTL?
Yeah, what are the fees for the PTL? Because we had a situation last year that we submitted payment for them and then had to recut additional checks, and it's still kind of not clear on the slide.
Oh, okay, on the slide. So let me just double check the slide and make sure it's, because it should be accurate. Because the fee did increase, I want to say, about a year ago. Just one second. I'm just double checking the slide to make sure it's correct.
Marina, the application fee for the PTL is $674.
Thank you, Rhonda. I just want to make sure. I believe that's what should be on the slide. Is that what your understanding was? 674?
Slides up, Maria.
Oh, I'm
yes.
sorry. Thank you, Sean.
Is there like another $50 or $25 something somewhere, or that is the whole total? That is what is expected.
Correct.
That is the total fee, and it includes fingerprint processing fees. That is the total application fee for the PTL.
Okay, and then there was a comment about the transitional to the full license, that they didn't have to pay something, but then there was the 888. So can we
Right. So if you have a PTL and you're transitioning to a physician surgeon's license, when you apply for the physician and surgeon's license, you don't have to pay an application fee again. You're just paying the initial license fee.
No application fee, but they're paying the 888. Is it 888?
The 888, right? The initial license fee, which includes that $25 Stephen M. Thompson fee as well.
Okay, or the okay.
Or the reduced, right?
Reduced, right?
Correct, right.
Okay. All right. And then my last question is, since everything's being done online, we're walking our interns through this. So when they're online and they're doing their application, are they able to go in and out of the application, or are they going to lose their data? How is it saving while they're entering information?
I'm actually going to let Sean confirm that, but I don't believe it saves their information. I believe they have to do it in one sitting, but maybe
it will save some information.
Oh,
Actually, it's the
Okay.
first initial screens. We call them the transaction suitability questions, where you're answering some yes or no's. Those value because your responses could have, in theory, changed in the days or however long it's been since you first initially started your application. So you'll go into the Breeze dashboard and you'll see when you first start the application, you go through this process where you select it from a drop down. After that point, if you get so far into the application, you hit cancel, it'll tell you that it's been saved. And then on your Breeze dashboard, you will see a application in progress, and you can press a button, select button to actually open it up and start it again. Now, the first few screens you go through, it does appear that it hasn't saved anything because, again, those first few screens are questions that it's necessary to re-answer them. But let's say you get, through your address information and you get in, 5, 6 screens into the application process, you'll find that once you get up to that point, that information is saved in there. So it just because in the first couple of screens you see that you have to refill out some bubbles or some drop downs, doesn't mean it hasn't saved some information when you get a little further past that. So we do get that question commonly on our help desk lines and stuff too. So it will keep some progress, but you do have to enter these transaction suitability questions. They're called it's the first 2 screens of the application every time you reopen your application. If that makes sense.
Yes, thank you for the warning on that.
I do want to point out too, I believe if you're like filling out one screen on the online app, if the 15 minutes I want to say goes where you're not doing anything on there, I believe it will time out as well.
It will time out, and it will not save the progress on that screen. So we try not to have it be so much information that it would take you more than 15 minutes on each screen. But yeah, that is a concern there as well too. And I Maria pointed it out too, that once you submit the application, that's it, it's over and final, and there's no way to go back and reopen that application and update anything too. So we also encourage everybody to give it a good read through before they hit that last submit button.
And that last submit button is after they make payment?
No, it's actually an attestation screen prior to making the payment. You're submitting the form data that you've done there, and you're testing that it's all true and correct. And then basically you hit submit there, and then it takes you to the payment screen.
So once you click the attestation, that's it. You're done.
In terms of filling out the forms, yes.
So you're not able to make any changes.
Correct.
Okay.
No changes are possible after that. I mean, you can wait till it's assigned to a licensing analyst and then, work out the specifics with them at that point. Maybe Maria and Rhonda can go further into that. But in terms of doing it online, yes, no changes are possible after that point.
Okay. Will there ever be a demo of, we try to see that we can't see the screens if we're not applying ourselves. So will there ever be a seminar or something that has those actual application screens that we could walk through with someone?
We don't have anything planned, but that's something we can definitely, look into.
Now that everything's converted to online, that would be very helpful for us, program managers, coordinators, institutional people, as we kind of walk with folks through this. Thank you. That's it for me.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go back here to Cha Esquera. Cha, you should be oops, sorry, Cha, give me a second. Clicked on the wrong button. There you go, Cha. You should be hopefully receiving a prompt on your end. Try to get you back in the position you were in.
Hi there. Sorry about that. Couldn't find it the first time.
No problem. Please go ahead.
My question is, our biggest holdup with the transition to P&S license seems to be step 3. Our residents ask, how can I check that it's been sent or that it's been received? Any tips? Like, how long does it typically take? Yeah, can you comment on step 3, getting sent over?
Yeah, the request goes through USMLE. So, as far as when did USMLE send it to us, we get it right away. So if they actually sent it to us, we'd have it, I believe, I don't want to say instantaneously, but very quickly. And then it's basically treated as like a pending document. And so I believe someone else had asked a similar question. Once you submit a document, and I say submit a document, it could be from a third party or, an electronic submittal. It's about a 2-week turnaround from the time we would actually see that and review it and make sure it's passing score and there's nothing else needed. But as far as confirming USMLE sent it to us, the only way to confirm would be to confirm with USMLE. But if they said they sent it to us, then I would give it about 2 weeks for us to check on that and review it and confirm that we don't need anything else.
Okay, it looks like she's gone back on mute there, so hope that answers the question. Next up here, we're going to Eva Gamboa. Eva, you should be receiving a prompt on that end. Couple more seconds here, Eva. It's like your line's open. Go ahead. So start over, Eva. Sorry, you just came on.
Yeah. So along the lines of step 3, for those that are transitioning, can they start their application process if they haven't even taken step 3 yet?
Yes, absolutely. You can start the application process again 6 months in advance, which might seem like a short amount of time because it would be potentially 6 months after they got their PTL. But yeah, they can definitely apply even though they haven't passed step 3. And in fact, we encourage folks to apply before then.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next up here, we have Karen Jameson. Karen, should be receiving a prompt on your end.
Can you hear me?
We can, Karen. Please go ahead.
This is Karen James, and I'm a new transitional year program director. So a couple of quick questions. One, I noticed that you stated there was a separate form for those that are transferring to a separate program. And I wasn't sure if that needs to be instituted by the primary transitional year program or if that needs to be instituted by the incoming categorical program.
So the first year program or the preliminary year program would be the one who would submit what's the PSU, the program status update change form. So
Okay.
they would submit that PSU saying, hey, this person's transferring, and ask for a little bit more information. And then the new program would have to submit an enrollment form so that we know this person's enrolled in this other program and we can update the license information.
Sounds good. So so as the first year program, I would be filling out a PTA, PTB, as well as a PSU form?
Correct.
And just because I'm new, where would I find these online docs? Is this on the Breeze site or is it on the?
No, they're on the board's website. So if you go to the board's website and you go to, I believe it's licensing, the licensing drop down, you can select by license type. And so if you can go to either the PTL or the physician surgeon license type and there's an apply button, and that will take you to all the forms.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Those were my
You're
questions.
welcome. Sure.
Thank you. Next up here, we have Robin Meehan. Robin, you should be receiving that prompt on your end.
Questions. And some of them I know the answer to, but I wanted to bring them up just in case other people weren't aware. So on the online application for Breeze, you need a social security number in order to proceed with the application, unless they've changed it. You've got people coming in on a visa that won't have a social, or if they're currently here on a visa that doesn't require a social, then they won't have that information to complete the application. So what steps do they do to submit?
So they just need to email licensing.questions@nbc.ca.gov and explain why they're not able to apply online, which in your scenario would be because they don't have an SSN or ITIN, and then we can mail them a form.
Okay, perfect.
Or email. We can, if you provide the email addresses, we're happy to email it to them as well.
Okay. And the other thing is license due dates. So when a trainee starts, say for instance, our interns start on 6/22, they are not clinical until probably the 28th or 29th. Is their license due date from the first day that they are a trainee with UCSD or the first day that they become clinical?
And just to be clear, when you say due date, are you referring to the 180 days they have to
Yes,
obtain their
I'm sorry.
PTL?
Yes.
Is it okay? Does the 180 days start from the day they're technically starting enrollment or the day they actually start clinical practice?
Correct.
I'm going to ask actually Rhonda to chime in on that one.
They are required to have the PTL within 180 days of enrollment in the program.
So it's
Okay.
the first day, even if they don't start clinical training till maybe a week or two
Okay.
later, right? Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And the other question I had was, we received a request from the board to submit an applicant's prior trainees filed, whether they wanted the evaluations and any remediation, disciplinary action, so on and so forth. But there was no waiver from the trainee or from the applicant to allowing us to release that information. Is that something that you guys generally receive, or we're kind of hesitant to just arbitrarily hand it over for fear of repercussions on our part for not having permission to turn that information over to you?
Yeah, they actually give us permission to request that information when they sign the application and submit it. So it's actually on the application they're signing, whether it's online or paper. And so we can provide that to you. That's what we typically would do, is we would just provide you a copy of the page they sign that says what they're, permitting the board to request and what is permitted to be released to us. So if you didn't get that, just let us know. I don't know if you have a contact already. If not, you can email this email address and we'll make sure we get that to you so you
Okay.
have that before providing
Perfect.
it to us.
And the other thing is something I'm even hesitant bringing it up, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, just because I get inundated with these questions.
Sure.
So the closer we get to the license due date, obviously, the more crazy it gets for you guys and us as well. But I get inundated with questions about, I called the medical board, but they didn't call me back, or I've sent them an email and they won't answer my question. So my response to them is, the time it's going to take for them to answer your phone call or answer your email is time taken away from processing an application. So if you're just looking for information to find out if they're missing anything or the status check or whatnot, I said, they're not going to call you back. Is there something that maybe you guys could put in a message or an automatic response so that they don't feel like they're being ignored, but there's an actual, very valid reason for not responding to their inquiry?
We actually do have that. So I guess I'd
Okay.
be curious who they emailed where they didn't get that automatic response, because we actually have a very long automatic response with kind of a lot of the stuff I went over as far as checking online breeze for your status, how long to wait, till your application's going to be reviewed and getting that deficiency letter. So there is quite a lot in there. I guess if there's something not addressed in there, that you think would be helpful in that automatic response, please let us know. We can obviously, update
Yeah.
it and make sure it's
Quite
helpful.
frankly, if you guys just say, we're not going to respond to status checks, here's the resources to figure it out yourself type of thing. But of course, in the
I think that's in
context,
there. I haven't looked at it in a little while, but that should be in there in the automatic
is that part of
response.
if they try and call and to try and call, that they get that same information as well, that, if you're just calling for a status check, I'm not going to call you back?
It kind of depends on who they're calling. For example, if they're calling me, I'm gonna get back to them. But if they're calling the reviewer, the reviewer might not be able to get back to them. And if they're calling our consumer information unit, they should be telling them that hey, the reviewers can't respond to status checks, and here's what you can do. So most of the time, yes, they're going to be told that, and if not, we'll check on it. We'll check on the status if we can.
Perfect, because like I said, I knew that you guys did something, because I don't know, you guys ought be getting hazard pay as it is, as far as I'm concerned. But I'll just go ahead. I'll just reiterate that and I'll let the programs know as well. Anyway, I'm babbling. Thank you very much. I appreciate the help. You guys
No,
do an
thank
awesome
you.
job, by the way.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for the questions. All these questions help us, inform us on, any further information we can be providing to people to help, answer those questions before we get them and maybe save some time there. But thanks for the question.
Next up, we're going to Colleen Bouton. Colleen, if you should be receiving that prompt on your end.
Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. So I think Shaw and Eva somewhat touched on my question. I've had a couple of residents who have submitted transition applications, and then had deficiency letters saying that their transcript of scores is not sufficient from the SFMB. And I was just wondering if for moving forward, if you could guide me so that I can guide them. Is there more than one way to request the score transcript? I know that they've had receipts saying that they've paid for the scores to be sent to you, and they felt that they've done everything that they should have and are surprised that they get these deficiencies. So can you touch base on that a little?
Well, it might depend on what the issue is with the scores. If the issue is that it doesn't show a passing score on a required exam, of course, we can't accept it till we see the passing score. But if the issue is the applicant sent it and it didn't come from okay, I'm not.
It's come from FSMB, and they are passing.
Okay, does the deficiency letter say what the specific issue is with the exam score report?
Let me see if I can.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot. It might be hard for me to address here without seeing it. So I don't mean to keep referring people to licensing.questions. It's just it's one of those things where I'm probably gonna have to look at to be able to answer your question more specifically on what the issue is.
I think one of them might have said that it didn't list passage of all required steps.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that could possibly FSMB not sent all 3 steps? Or
that's possible because, depending on when they took the exam and when they requested the score report be sent to us, they may not have finished compiling the results of the exam yet by the time we got the score report or they sent us a score report. So that could be a possibility.
Okay. So,
but if it's anything further than that, just, definitely email us and we can look into it, especially if you're seeing this for a lot of your residents, then it might be something we can work out either with, talk to FSMB about if there's some, different kind of communication we can provide them where they can request or provide to residents when they're making these requests, or some further information we can send out to folks to make sure we're not, falling into that where we're getting score reports too early.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then I want to echo Nicole's request for a demo would be awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, next up here we have Miriam. Miriam sending that request now. Miriam, it looks like your line's open. Are you there?
Yes. Are you able to hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So I have a kind of a 2-part question. So the scenario I have is, I've completed my postgraduate training in California. I graduated in 2021. I moved out of state to Arizona, and I've been practicing here for about a year or so. And now I'm going back for fellowship to California. So when I was applying for the application, I was a little confused as to which one was appropriate for me. But after talking to a couple people, I was told that the transitional application was okay as long as my PTL, because my PTL expired when I graduated residency, but they said as long as it's within 5 years of expiration, you're allowed to do the transitional application. So I just wanted to confirm if that was correct. And then the second question along with that is, do I need to repeat the live scan fingerprints, or am I okay with my prior application ones?
So if I'm assuming your PTL is in a canceled status currently? Correct?
Yes, expired June 2021 when I graduated residency.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we wouldn't have your fingerprint results anymore. So yes, you would need to be refingerprinted. The transition application's fine. There's technically not a deadline on, oh, it's been X number of years since I had a PTL and I now, can I submit a transition app? I mean, technically you could submit it as long as the law doesn't change. So right now you're fine. You could definitely submit a transition app and, we could go ahead and process it. But if any of the licensure requirements changed in the meantime, we might have to have you submit a full application again. But we keep, all those documents you submitted with your PTL app. So most likely we wouldn't have to, re-request those documents, which is why the transition app would be the most appropriate currently.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you
But
so
you
much.
will have to do the fingerprints again, unfortunately.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Sure.
Next up here we have Christina Ornelius. Christina, you should be receiving that request. Looks like your line's open. Christina, are you there?
There is a deadline, or you recommend a deadline for their USMLE Step 3s to be completed?
I think part of it might depend on how long it takes FSMB to score and release your exam scores. So how, building in that time before your PTL expires. So making sure you're sitting for it, passing it, and enough time for FSMB to score and provide us those exam results before your PTL expires.
And then also, if I have a PGY3 resident that needs extending the residency for about 4 months, is there another form that we have to fill out to submit?
Do they have a PTL?
Yes.
Okay, so no, it would be the program status update change form. So that form would be appropriate for that situation.
So the PSU form?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct.
And then that's the same as a PGY3 going into a fellowship in the same institution into a different program is just the PSU form as well?
And sorry, can you say again? You said a PGY3 transferring to a new.
That a PGY3 graduating in possibly an IM program going into a fellowship into a different program in the same institution, that would be a PSU form that we would submit.
Are they a PTL holder?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That'd be the same form. Yeah, the PSU is only needed for PTL licensees. If they have a physician surgeon's license, we don't need the PSU.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'm sorry. Let me backtrack on that. There would be the only exception to, I don't even want to say it's an exception because it's really not the PSU form we would need. When they're coming up for renewal or they're coming up on completing their 36 months, if there was any extension or anything like that, it would be addressed on the PTA PTB form, which is why we wouldn't really need the PSU. We don't need to know at that time that they're transferring because there's no change in the license information we'd have to make. But if they're submitting the PTA PTB, that's where we would expect to see that that kind of information, is if they, when they transferred, when they left the program or why or whatever occurred, or if it had to be extended, whatever the situation.
All right, thank you, Christina. Next up here we have Andrew Schuin. Andrew, there, your line's open. Andrew, if you're there, send you the request one more time. Marina Catherine Taylor's also asking to be unmuted. Would you like me to add her to the?
Sure, yeah.
Just a second to do that, Catherine. Andrew, looks like your line's open. Are you there?
Yes. Hi.
Please go ahead.
I'm a Canadian physician in Ontario looking to practice in California. I got my deficiencies, and one of them was a social security number. Is there any? Is there a easy way to get that, or is that a strict requirement? Is there another number I can get other than a social security number?
The only other number is the individual taxpayer identification number, or ITIN.
Yeah.
So it's an SSN or ITIN is required to obtain a license.
Okay, got it.
that your other question, Andrew?
No, that's it. I have to be a U.S. citizen to get a social security number. Is that correct?
That I can't answer that question. I'd have to go to the Social Security Administration
Okay.
for that question. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you,
You're
Andrew. Next up here we have Lindsay. Lindsay, you should be receiving that prompt on your end. I know some of you have been on mute for a while here, and maybe you've stepped away from your device, but okay, there you go, Lindsay. Looks like your line's open. Are you there?
Two questions. I was wondering if a licensee applicant sends any supporting documents that are not specifically requested by the board, are those considered or read?
It would depend on what the document is. I mean, if it's a document that we don't need, it may be read and, just filed in the file. And maybe a cursory review. It kind of depends on what the document is.
Okay, and
If you want to
then
provide if you want to provide an example, I might be able to be more specific.
letters of support, letters from treating physicians, letters, a personal statement, personal narrative statements.
Yeah, I mean, again, that really depends on the situation. If it's something, if there was maybe unusual circumstances with the application, then and it's going through that additional review, then yes, those documents are going to be read. But if there's no unusual circumstances and those aren't needed to determine whether or not the person should be issued a full and unrestricted license, then most likely we're not going to be reviewing those letters.
Okay, and then what is the process of transferring any disciplinary action from a PTL to a P&S?
That is a very specific question that I can't answer on here. We'd have to probably chat offline. So if you want to reach out to licensing.questions, and I can make sure that question comes to me, but that's a very specific scenario question.
Well, I was just wondering. It's not just a straight transfer. Are you guys reconsidering when you transfer the license? Are you reconsidering the license entirely, or is it just a continuation of the first license?
So the reason I can't answer that is because it depends on what the terms of the discipline are that were imposed on the PTL.
Okay.
So that makes a big difference on what we do going forward when they apply for a physician surgeon's license.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Marina, can I make a comment, please? This is Catherine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, about 3 or 4 people ago, someone asked a question about the scores and why we're not receiving them or accepting them. Recently, USMLE told me there's 3 different ways that somebody can submit scores. One is to the self. The other is when they send the transcript to any other entity, the physician can type in any mailing address that they desire. Unfortunately, the system does not know to send it through the portal, so they should do the third item, which is state licensing authority. Medical board choosing this category sends the transcripts electronically to the state board portal, which is the only way that we accept them. I think a lot of people don't know that. So I just wanted to add that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And since we just kind of got this information, we'll definitely look to make it available on our website. Probably added under the FAQs and on the application page if that's something that's coming up a lot. So
yeah,
thanks,
I'll
Catherine.
do that. I'll do that next week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Next up here we have Don Curtis. Don. Oops, sorry, Don. I jumped the gun and sent you the request a second time. Let me resend that one more time. Sorry, go ahead and mute again there, Don. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a couple of questions with regard to Breeze. I have a handful of residents that have applied for their transition to P&S, and this was back in October of 22, and there's no updates in Breeze. So there seems to be some discrepancies with updates. And so my first question is, when the application is received, is there a template or kind of a standard format that the analysts use and just state application received, under review, just so they know that the application was received and in process. And then how often do they provide updates, because some of them haven't received anything. There's no deficiencies, there's nothing. And of course, when they try to reach out to their analysts, they do get that automated response that the board is not going to be giving, or the analyst will not be giving any status updates, and to refer to Breeze, but there's nothing in Breeze. And so that is my question with the updates in Breeze.
I'm going to try to answer it completely, but there could be a lot of different scenarios with your question as far as what's going on with it. But generally, if they've applied in October, they should have received a deficiency letter, which would have been emailed to them, and the deficiencies would have shown in Breeze. If they have not received a deficiency letter and have never seen deficiencies listed in Breeze, and they applied in October, you should reach out to licensing.questions with their information and let them know this, put the situation in your email so we can look into that, because that shouldn't happen. So I'd be very concerned if someone applied in October and has not received a deficiency letter, never been notified of their deficiencies, whether in the letter or in Breeze. But if they did receive a deficiency letter at some point and they've remediated those deficiencies and nothing's showing, it's most likely moving forward for licensure. I don't know, again, the timing of, when the deficiencies were remediated, but once there's no deficiencies, it's a pretty quick process to licensure. It can be 1 week, it could be 2 weeks, but definitely it's usually within 2 weeks that the license is issued, in which case you won't see in Breeze, there's no different statuses in Breeze to tell you where it's at in each step of the process, unfortunately. I believe there's only a couple statuses available in Breeze for a pending application, and I can't tell you them exactly offhand, but one is, I think, opened and the other is pending. And then beyond that, it's just the license being issued. But that's why I always refer people to the list of deficiencies in Breeze. But if you're not seeing any, it's either it hasn't been reviewed yet, which if they're applied in October, that would be an issue. So definitely let us know. You can email this email address, or they've been remediated, there are no deficiencies, and the license is going to be issued shortly.
Okay. I think one of the things that might be helpful is if in Breeze it could be expanded to give some additional status updates if there aren't deficiencies, like application, like you said, open, under review, and if it's under review, is that 4 months? Is that 5 months if there's no deficiencies? I guess because that seems like an awful long time without any updates. And again, I will follow up again, because I have done what you've suggested, and I'm still waiting. The other question about Breeze is there a option for the applicants to submit additional documents and upload documents for deficiencies such as letters and other documentation that's being requested? I had a applicant recently reach out saying that they were not able to upload documentation.
Yeah, that's functionality we don't have yet in Breeze, but we are working on, which is basically making it possible for, once an application is submitted in Breeze, just as we explained before how you can't go back once you hit that submit button, that once it's submitted and paid for, that there's a way for the applicant to submit additional documents in Breeze. So we're working on that. But in the meantime, if it's something that could be attached in Breeze, then most likely it can be emailed to the reviewer as well. There might be some exceptions to that depending on what the document is that's needed. But most of the applicant documents, the ones that the applicant has to submit that don't come from a third party, can be emailed to the reviewer as well. So that's an option.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Don. Next up here we have Amy Yin. Amy should be receiving that request. Just so you know, Marie, we have about 5 minutes left till 1:30, but 15 or so still in queue. So just to I can go as long
Okay.
as you want to, but just
Well,
keep
we'll
me
try to
posted.
get through as many as we can in the next 5 minutes, but what I was going to tell folks is, if we don't, please email your questions to licensing.questions. We will get back to you on those. But go ahead. We'll try to get through as many as we can.
Okay.
Amy, looks. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can, Amy. Go ahead.
Okay. I can't recall if this was asked, but I know in the past, like years ago, we had like a licensing matrix or, a list of residents or incoming fellows that are coming to the institution in California and stating, like their deadline, just so that I don't know if they can be given priority just because the volume is so high, or is that not something that you do anymore? Just
Yeah,
to gauge.
sure. We don't typically do, I say typically do that anymore. We have been in situations where we have a large volume of residents who are coming up on their expiration. And because, as you know, I mentioned before, it's an 80-day turnaround right now for the initial review. So because of that backlog, we're trying to avoid residents from having to cease training because they're waiting, on their application to be processed. So there are situations where we have accepted those lists or matrix, as you call them, and tried to make sure those folks get processed before their deadline. But I can't guarantee that year round because we do have to review applications in the order received, except for expedite applications. But like I said, there had been parts, exceptions because of either expiration of a waiver, one of those COVID waivers, or there was just a high volume of applicants that were going to have to cease training, and we wanted to avoid that, of course. What we're really looking at is a way to provide that information, and one of the previous participants had asked about, more status information available in Breeze. So what we're looking at is how can we provide that information electronically in a system. I can't say right now whether it would be Breeze or another system, but a way that you get more of those, more information on the status of your application, and that you can even possibly authorize third parties, such as a program coordinator, to view certain information on the status of your application with the authorization of the applicant. So the matrix, unfortunately, take a lot of staff time to review those and pull that information and provide it to that program. Plus, we have to collect authorizations and review those. And as you know, we're trying to focus primarily on just processing applications, which is why we don't really accept those anymore and look at those anymore, except in extreme situations. But the hope is that it's going to be more automated and more information available in an electronic format that an applicant can choose to make available to a third party as well, to of course avoid the manual process of providing you that information. So just to give you a little background on kind of why we don't look at those anymore and request those anymore, and where we're trying to go, and hopefully soon with our system.
Next up, we have Joseph Stuckelman. Joseph, sending you that request now.
I just want to confirm that if you are submitting as a program the CTV through Docs, it does not need to be notarized and it does not need a seal.
Correct.
Okay, so and is there a maximum amount of time that can be submitted before the program start date?
No, you can submit it as long as you have an open application with us. You can submit it at any time.
Okay.
So if you haven't applied yet, no, they wouldn't be able to submit it. But as long as you've applied, it can be submitted anytime.
Okay. So the resident has to have the open application.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have McCatson McGollanis. I believe I'm getting somewhere close with that. Looks like your line's open. Please go ahead.
We're sending or say recording the presentation. Where on the Breeze website would I find that?
It will actually be on the board's website, and
So
the Breeze website, yeah, it's a separate website, but we'll probably put it on our licensing page, which I actually think we still have the one up from 2022. We did a couple webinars in the early parts of 2022. Those are still up there. I believe it's at the top of the licensing page. But that's where we'll put it, and we'll probably send out some kind of listserv announcement when we make it available or something, or maybe put it on our news page. But for everyone listening, if you haven't signed up for our listserv, please do so, because we do a lot of reminders and updates and alerts through our listserv, which you can do through our website. You can sign up for those listservs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Take a few more, Marina, or how would you like to proceed?
How many more do we? I don't know if we keep getting new ones.
I've got, yeah, a few keep ticking in. I've got 9 right now, it looks like. 8.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get through at least a few more.
Arizu Abasi, you should be receiving that prompt on your end. Looks like your line's open.
So I have a question about the requirement for PNS license, 24 continuous months of training within the same program. I am an international medical graduate currently doing my PGY1 prelim year outside California, and I'm gonna come to the California to start my PGY2 prelim year. And I was wondering how this translates into my situation. Am I gonna still be able to go to another program, continue my categorical residency, or if I get a categorical position outside the California, am I gonna be able to come back to California, do 2 years of fellowship or something like that to be eligible for PNS?
So just to be clear, you're going to have completed 12 months by the time you transfer to California, correct?
Exactly, correct.
And are you a U.S. or Canadian medical school graduate or international? I'm sorry if you said that. I missed. International. Okay, so you would be applying for a PTL when you come to California, and your PTL would be issued up to whenever you'll have completed 27 months of training. So if if you've completed 12 and you're starting your PGY2 here, you would just be issued your PTL for whenever that 27 months would be up in whether you complete it in California or not, you'll still be issued it for the 27 months. So let's say you come here for your PGY2, but then you transfer out of state after your PGY2, your PTL, but if the expiration date hasn't come up yet, that's okay. Your program would just notify us using the PSU form. So your PSU, the form would be submitted saying, hey, this resident is transferring out of state. They're no longer going to be enrolled here. And then we would cancel your PTL if you went out of state. And then of course you can, when you come back, you'll have enough training to apply for licensure for a physician surgeon's license. And that would be at the point you would apply for a physician surgeon's if you were leaving and coming back. Of course, if you're staying here, just as I mentioned in the presentation, you would apply for your physician surgeon's license, ideally 6 months before your PTL expires.
Understood. Thank you so much. So one last question. Let's say I only do only 1 year of prelim 2 in California, do all the training, including fellowship outside California. If I want to come back to California to work, I am gonna apply for PNS. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you can, right, that's correct. If you come here after 1 year, you get your PTL, then as long as you have the training required for a physician surgeon's license, whether you go out of state or not, once you're ready for that physician surgeon's license, you would just apply for that license, but you would use the transition app. Again, assuming the licensing laws don't change in that time frame, you could still submit a transition app to get your physician surgeon's license once you have the PTL.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, next up here we have Lorena Davis. Lorena, you should be receiving that prompt. Looks like your line's open. Lorena, are you there?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Okay, my question was going back to when they submit their PTL application through the Breeze website. You guys talked about how they can submit everything and then the payment portion comes in after. My question is, when they submit the paperwork, will that still be moving through the process, or does it get held up until the payment is met?
It's not considered received until we receive the app and the payment. So correct, in your scenario, it would be held up because we wouldn't have payment. So we don't process it without payment.
But my question is, would it be looked at all? Like if their medical school has sent their stuff, will you guys start working on it or not at all?
No, not at all. It won't be
Not at all.
touched. All that will happen is a letter will be sent saying you have 30 days, or actually I think it's 45 days to submit payment, or we're going to cancel your application, basically.
Okay, okay. And then my other question was in regards to fingerprinting. Is the fingerprinting part of that initial PTL application submission? Does it have to be part of that, or can they submit that after as well?
It's part of it's required for a PTL, so they do have to submit fingerprints when applying for a PTL.
Okay, okay. But to click that submission, does that form have to be already there, or they can still
Oh,
click submit and go back later?
no, you can. I mean, so first, I strongly encourage all documents to be attached in Breeze when applying, but you don't
Mhm.
have to have all those documents to apply. If you haven't gotten fingerprinted yet, that's okay. Go ahead and submit your PTL application online. I don't
Okay.
want anyone to wait to
That's my
submit their
question because
app.
they're coming in
Right,
from other states. Yeah. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
okay,
No,
okay.
definitely they can go ahead and apply, and most likely they'll get a deficiency letter requesting the fingerprints, or maybe they come in before that. That's fine.
Okay, and then I've been hearing the licensing dot questions at nbc.ca.gov. So that is the actual email to email, because I do have, like some of the others, a particular resident that submitted his PTL to full licensure. His whole class did. Everybody else has gone through just fine, and he has not received anything, no deficiency letter. He's emailed, he's called, he's getting nowhere.
And
And
it's
we
been
don't even know.
about 80 days since he applied.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Then
'Cause
yes,
we, okay.
definitely email that that email address so we can make sure, because it sometimes, and I'm not saying it's in the situation, but what often happens is the email address changes and we
Mhm.
don't know they have a different email address, and so it'll go to an old email address. So that does happen sometimes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know we have more questions, but unfortunately, we're going to have to stop there. Again, please email your questions to licensing.questions@nbc.ca.gov. We'll post this on our website and probably send something out through our listserv to notify folks when it's been posted. And then eventually I'll post the slides on our website as well. But I think I'd like to add a few things to it just based on the questions we got today. And just, thank you to everyone for participating. These were really good questions. I know they help you a lot, but they also help us a lot to make sure, we're communicating everything we need to folks. And I just appreciate your time. So thank you, everyone, and have a good day.